It usually starts long before you even realize it. You don't wake up one morning suddenly feeling older inside. You don't notice it happen like a birthday or a milestone. It builds quietly, in the background, through the small moments that shape who you are. And one day, you look around and realize you don't think like the people your age. You don't feel as carefree, as light, as innocent. Your mind carries weight. Your chest carries memories. Your heart carries understanding that feels older, deeper, heavier. For many people, this emotional aging begins in childhood, not because they wanted it, not because they were ready, but because life demanded it. Maybe you were the kid who paid attention while everyone else played, the one who noticed tension in a room before anyone else did, the one who could read the expressions of adults like weather patterns, knowing exactly when a storm was coming. You weren't given a childhood, you were handed responsibility, wrapped in silence. Children learn emotional maturity when they don't get to be children. Perhaps you grew up in a house where you had to stay alert, where the volume of a sigh meant more than the words that followed, where mistakes were punished, not discussed, where you had to manage your parents' moods because no one managed yours. You became the peacekeeper, the careful one, the sensitive observer. You learned how to regulate others' emotions before you learned to understand your own. You became older, not because of time, but because of survival. And that survival shaped you in ways you are still unraveling today. When you feel emotionally older than your age, it's not because you're wise or mature in the romantic, poetic sense. It's because you learn to anticipate danger. You learn to read faces. You learn to carry burdens silently. You learn to hold everything together when the adults who were supposed to hold you together couldn't. You learn to shrink your needs because someone else's needs were always louder. That kind of childhood isn't just difficult. It accelerates your emotional development, but in a crooked, uneven way, like a tree forced to grow toward whatever little sunlight it can find. By the time you reach adulthood, something strange happens. People your age laugh at things that don't interest you. They worry about problems that feel small to you. They argue about trivial things while your brain is wired to think about consequences, outcomes, long-term effects, stability. You're not trying to be serious. You're just built that way now. But it's more than maturity. It's emotional fatigue. When you grow up in environments that force you into early emotional adulthood, your mind ages faster. You develop the instincts of someone who has lived through too much, too early. So while your chronological age increases normally, your emotional age races ahead. You become the person who listens deeply, who understands too much, who senses danger before anyone else does, who carries the emotional weight of every room they enter. And sometimes, that emotional aging shows in your relationships. You may be the person others come to for advice, for comfort, for reassurance. They see strength in you, calmness, wisdom, grounding. But what they don't see is the tiredness behind it, the exhaustion that comes from being the strong one for too long. The truth is, you didn't grow older inside because you wanted to be strong. You became strong because you had no other choice. There's another layer to this feeling, the emotional distance. When you feel older than everyone around you, you don't relate the same way. You become an outsider, even in your own age group. You don't fit into the carefree, chaotic energy of people your age. Instead, you often find yourself drawn to older individuals, people who carry the same heaviness, the same perspective, the same depth. You feel safer around them, understood, matched. But that mismatch can make you feel lonely. Not lonely because you lack people, but because you lack peers. You lack the sense of belonging that others experience effortlessly. This emotional loneliness grows when you're always the one who takes things seriously, who thinks before speaking, who worries about the impact of their words, who observes the world carefully instead of rushing through it. You carry a kind of gravity inside you, a deeper awareness of consequences, patterns, and feelings. It's not something you can switch off. It's who you've become. But emotional aging doesn't always come from childhood alone. Sometimes it comes from heartbreak, the kind that shifts your worldview permanently. Some losses age you overnight. Some betrayals make you grow up faster than any birthday ever could. When you've been abandoned or misunderstood or pushed aside, something in you hardens, matures, sharpens. It teaches you to protect yourself, to close doors, to analyze intentions, to expect the worst and prepare for it. That kind of emotional aging changes how you love, how you trust, how you connect. Other times it comes from being too empathetic. Yes, empathy can age you. When you feel other people's pain like it's your own, you absorb emotional weight that isn't yours. You carry it deeply, silently, until your heart feels too full, too old, too stretched. Empaths age faster inside because they feel too much, too often, too intensely. Their hearts grow tired from caring. So why do you feel older? Because your emotional world was shaped by circumstances, not by time. Because you learned lessons early. Because you felt things too deeply too young. Because you had responsibilities you shouldn't have had. Because you couldn't afford to be naive. Because experience aged you before life gave you a chance to grow at a normal pace. And this emotional age shows in everything. How you think, how you love, how you argue, how you forgive, how you protect yourself, how you see the world. You become cautious, you become observant, you become emotionally intelligent, but also emotionally tired. Sometimes you long for the version of yourself that never got to exist. The carefree you, the playful you, the innocent you, the unburdened you. You don't just feel older, you feel like you missed stages of life that others got to live. But here's the thing no one tells you. Feeling emotionally older doesn't mean you're broken. It means you survived. It means you adapted in ways that kept you safe. It means you developed emotional muscles earlier than most. It means your mind learned to carry weight efficiently, even when it exhausted you. And there's something powerful in that. Something strong, something rare. You didn't grow older inside by accident. Your emotional age is a story of resilience, one written through experience, pain, observation, responsibility, and survival. But survival isn't the end of the story. It's only the beginning. Because now, as an adult, you get to decide what happens next. You get to rewrite your relationship with yourself. You get to slow down, to reclaim the childhood you missed, to soften the parts of you that hardened too early. Emotional aging may have shaped you, but it doesn't have to define who you become from here. And that's where the second section begins. How to understand this inner age, how it affects your relationships, and how you can finally learn to feel young again, not in years, but in heart.
You grow older emotionally because life moved faster than you did. But once you recognize it, something shifts, almost like you're seeing your inner world in a new light. You start noticing patterns that never made sense before. You realize why certain things exhaust you, why some people feel childish to you, why you crave stability, peace, and emotional honesty more than anything else. Your emotional age hasn't just shaped who you are, it has shaped the entire way you relate to other people. One of the first places this emotional age reveals itself is in relationships. When you feel older inside, you aren't drawn to dramatic people. You don't chase chaos. You don't find excitement in games or mixed signals. You're not interested in temporary feelings. You want something real, grounded, stable, something that doesn't require you to babysit someone's emotions or manage their insecurities. And because of that, you often struggle to connect with people your age. Not because you're picky, not because you're distant, but because you crave depth, and depth is not common. You may find yourself analyzing everything: tone, intent, consistency, patterns. You don't do this to judge or control. You do it because your emotional maturity makes you see things others overlook. You notice emotional dishonesty. You sense manipulation before it becomes obvious. You read the room like a second language. Your emotional instincts are precise, sometimes painfully so. This makes relationships complicated. You attract people who need stability, but you rarely find people who can offer it back. You become the anchor, the healer, the listener, the advisor. Everyone comes to you when they're falling apart, but where do you go when you're the one holding cracks? When you feel emotionally older, you often carry the invisible burden of being the strong one, even when you desperately want someone to be strong for you. You want someone to understand your depth, not just rely on it. And then there's the exhaustion. A kind of tiredness that other people don't notice because they mistake maturity for invulnerability. They think you have it all figured out. They believe you can handle anything. They assume your emotional intelligence comes with limitless emotional energy. But emotional maturity doesn't mean emotional capacity. You can understand everything and still feel drained. You can appear wise and still be hurting. You can be strong for others and still break quietly when no one's watching. The more emotionally older you feel, the more you crave peace. Not because you're boring, but because your inner world has seen enough chaos. Silence becomes comfort. Predictability becomes safety. You avoid unnecessary arguments, not because you're passive, but because your soul is tired of battles that lead nowhere. You want clarity. You want truth. You want honesty. You want relationships where both people show up as equals, not where you constantly shrink or carry. This emotional age also affects your goals. You may feel disconnected from conventional milestones, parties, trends, small talk, superficial friendships. You think in long arcs, not short thrills. You want purpose, not distraction. You want meaning, not noise. You develop ambitions that don't match your age group. You build plans that others find too serious. You focus on personal growth, stability, emotional peace. Your mind feels older because it is, not in years, but in weight. And yet, despite all the strength, there is a softer truth hidden underneath. You didn't age early because you wanted to be wiser. You aged early because you had no safe place to be young. This inner aging often carries grief, a quiet grief you rarely talk about. The grief of missing innocence, the grief of feeling old before your time, the grief of being the responsible one, the grief of watching others laugh freely while you monitored the emotional temperature of every room, the grief of not having the luxury of cluelessness or carelessness. But here is the turning point, the part that most people never reach. You can be emotionally older and still heal. You can be emotionally older and still reclaim softness. You can be emotionally older and still learn joy. You can be emotionally older and still grow younger on the inside. Because emotional age isn't fixed, it's fluid, elastic, changeable. And it begins with recognizing the parts of yourself that were forced to grow up early. Start with the pressure you carry, the sense of responsibility that follows you everywhere like a shadow. That feeling that everything depends on you, that if you don't hold things together, everything will fall apart. This pressure didn't grow from adulthood, it grew from childhood. And sometimes simply acknowledging that changes everything. Then there's the guilt. Emotionally older people carry guilt like an extra layer of skin. They feel guilty for saying no, guilty for needing rest, guilty for wanting space, guilty for prioritizing themselves. But this guilt is not a sign of selfishness. It's evidence of how deeply you were conditioned to put yourself last. Healing begins when you learn to challenge that guilt, when you remind yourself that you are not responsible for everyone anymore. Next comes softness. Softness doesn't come naturally to someone who has been hardened, but it is possible, slowly, gently, intentionally. Softness is allowing yourself to play, to enjoy, to try things without analyzing them to death. Softness is giving yourself permission to rest, to ask for help, to be vulnerable. Softness is letting yourself be human again, not a soldier of your past. Your emotional age begins to shift when you stop carrying what was never yours, when you stop trying to be the caretaker for everyone, when you stop absorbing emotions that don't belong to you, when you stop confusing survival instincts for personality traits, when you start living for yourself, not out of fear. And perhaps the most important part, you begin to heal when you meet people who match your emotional age. People who don't drain you, but understand you. People who don't take advantage of your maturity, but appreciate it. People who bring peace, not chaos. People who make you feel safe enough to be young again. Because emotional age doesn't just rise, it can fall. It can loosen. It can soften. It can breathe. And one day, with time and healing, you may realize something beautiful. You are not older inside, you are layered. You are not tired inside, you are aware. You are not broken inside, you are evolved. Your emotional age isn't a burden. It's a map of everything you've survived, everything you've learned, everything you've carried. And now, it can also become a map of everything you're ready to release. You don't have to stay older forever. You get to grow softer. You get to grow lighter. You get to grow free. Because now, for the first time, the story is yours to rewrite. Not as the child who grew up too fast, but as the adult who finally gets to choose their own pace.